Welcome to the debate.
Yeah, glad to be here.
And just a quick reminder before we dive in, if you're watching us on the NFL Nexus channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and drop a comment on what you think about today's topic.
Yeah, and if you want exclusive content and perks, definitely become a channel member. Just click that join button below. It really helps out the show.
Absolutely. All right, so historically in the NFL, turning a 3-win disaster into a legitimate playoff contender, it requires this grueling multi-year demolition, right?
Oh, totally. You tear the roster down to the studs.
Exactly. You draft high, you stockpile capital, and you basically ask your fan base to endure, 3 seasons of just unwatchable football while the foundation settles. And this is what we are looking at today, what if a franchise could just bypass that demolition phase entirely?
Which is a huge what if.
It is. But what if a precise combination of off-season acquisitions, so a rookie quarterback, a high-priced veteran bridge, an $81 million center, and a mastermind play caller could instantly hotwire a dormant organization? So today our central focus is the 2026 Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, coming off a pretty abysmal 3-win season.
Right, and they have fundamentally restructured their offensive ecosystem based on all the off-season reporting. The central question for our discussion is this: is this meticulously crafted infrastructure enough to propel them into immediate playoff contention, or, is this off-season optimism just blinding us to the structural, mechanical realities of the league?
I think it might be the latter.
Well, I take the position that the Las Vegas front office has executed a textbook offensive rebuild. I mean, they've created a fail-safe environment that provides the exact structural integrity necessary for a surprise playoff push.
And my perspective is that while the Raiders have assembled a roster that looks genuinely spectacular on paper, projecting a jump from a 3-win disaster to a playoff contender, it just ignores the highly fragile, interconnected nature of their new offense. It also vastly underestimates the brutal reality of the AFC West division.
Okay, well, let's start by examining the architecture of what Las Vegas has actually built, because I honestly see this as a masterclass in how you insulate a young franchise quarterback.
A masterclass? That's strong.
The mistake teams make when they draft a guy #1 overall is throwing him to the wolves. They put him behind a porous offensive line, give him subpar weapons, and expect him to be a savior. But the Raiders looked at Fernando Mendoza, a kid coming off a Heisman-winning, undefeated national championship season, and decided to build a fortress around him.
Right, but
They executed 2 brilliant maneuvers simultaneously. First, they secured Kirk Cousins as a high-level bridge quarterback, so there is absolutely zero rush to force Mendoza onto the field if he isn't mentally ready, right?
Okay, sure. Having Cousins as a nice safety net.
And second, they made a massive foundational investment, handing center Tyler Linderbaum a record-breaking 3-year, $81 million contract. They paired that investment with Clint Kubiak's wide zone system, which we know analytically elevates quarterback play across the entire league.
We do, in theory.
Add in elite playmakers like Ashton Jonty and Brock Bowers, and you have a thoroughly credible case for a playoff run. I mean, the analysts at Bleacher Report Gridiron, they are right to see the vision here. The blueprint is empirically sound.
Look, the methodology of acquiring talent is sound, yes. I'll acknowledge the individual pieces are undeniable, but we cannot analyze this team in a vacuum. We have to look at the empirical baseline we are actually starting from.
Which is what? Last year's record?
Yes, context is everything in professional football. This is a team that won exactly 3 games last year. 3. They were plagued by a fractured offensive line, abysmal quarterback play, and just an overall lack of competitive stamina. You don't just erase that muscle memory of losing overnight, just because you signed a few massive checks and drafted a talented rookie.
I mean, you do if the people playing are entirely different.
But the environment they play in isn't different. Look at the AFC West. It is an absolute gauntlet. You have the Patrick Mahomes-led Chiefs, who basically dictate the terms of engagement for the entire league.
Sure, the Chiefs are the Chiefs.
Nightmare. So predicting a playoff berth right now, it's placing a massive bet on a machine with 100 new, uncalibrated moving parts.
Okay, I get the skepticism regarding those moving parts, but I want to dive into exactly how those parts are designed to work together. Because this isn't just like a random collection of expensive players.
It kind of feels like it sometimes with this franchise.
No, think of this new offense less like a house of cards and more like a high-end Swiss watch. Every gear is meticulously designed to turn the next one and take the pressure off the main spring, which obviously is the quarterback. The Raiders aren't asking Mendoza to build the watch, they just need him to wind it.
Winding it against NFL defenses isn't exactly easy, though.
But by installing Kubiak's wide zone scheme, you inherently simplify the reads for whoever is under center. The wide zone is all about lateral movement, right? The entire offensive line steps in unison to one side, stretching the defensive front horizontally.
Right, forcing linebackers to make binary choices.
Exactly. Do I flow to the sideline to stop Ashton Jonty, or do I stay home? But the real masterstroke that makes this whole gear system turn is Tyler Linderbaum. When you make a center the highest paid in NFL history at $27 million a year, you aren't just paying for his physical blocking, you are paying for his cognitive processing.
Which is incredibly important, I grant you that. But how much can one player realistically offset?
He offsets the hardest part of the modern NFL game. He takes on the intellectual burden of setting the protections. Take something like a coffeehouse blitz.
Right, those deceptive looks.
Yeah, where linebackers casually mill around the line of scrimmage, pretending to talk to each other, only to violently shoot through a gap at the snap. A rookie quarterback usually panics in that scenario. But Linderbaum is in charge of identifying those fire zones, pointing out the Mike linebacker, and shifting the slide protection before the ball is even snapped.
I mean, yes, that is his job.
And it completely shifts the cognitive load away from the quarterback. Whether it's Cousins utilizing his veteran savvy or Mendoza using his raw arm talent, they just have to catch the snap and execute the throw. The intellectual heavy lifting is done for them.
Let me stop you there, because while that breakdown of the wide zone and Linderbaum's cognitive load is, theoretically perfect, I have to push back on the idea that this transition is going to be seamless.
I didn't say seamless. I said structurally sound.
But you are talking about onboarding an entirely new communication infrastructure across 11 players who have never played together in this system. You have a new offensive coordinator calling plays, a new center translating them, and either a rookie or an aging veteran learning a new vernacular. Historically, the friction of getting all those moving parts to synchronize is massive.
But they are professionals, elite ones.
Elite or not, defensive coordinators in this league are ruthless. In week 1, they aren't going to sit back in a base defense and let Tyler Linderbaum comfortably point out assignments.
But Linderbaum has seen every pressure package in the league. He isn't a rookie.
He hasn't seen them while communicating with these specific guards, to this specific quarterback, in this specific cadence. Defensive play callers are going to immediately test that untested communication loop. They are going to run simulated pressures, overload the A-gaps.
Right, crowding the center.
Exactly. Crowding 2 massive defensive tackles and a blitzing linebacker into the immediate space on either side of the center. If Linderbaum calls a slide protection to the left, but the right guard hesitates for even half a second because he's still learning the terminology, a 280-pound defensive tackle is going to break Mendoza's ribs.
Wow, okay. Little dramatic, but...
It's the reality of the league. The gears of that Swiss watch you mentioned have to be machined to absolute microscopic perfection to work. If the synchronization is off by a fraction of a second, the play is dead. And rebuilding teams, by definition, lack that synchronization in year 1.
Okay, that friction you're describing is a fair reality check. It's exactly why you see young offenses stall. But your argument assumes the players operating within this system are average and that they need perfectly clean pockets to generate positive plays. They aren't average. Let's look at the ultimate pressure release valve on this offense. Brock Bowers.
Ah, yes, the tight end.
If you look at the recent ESPN executive poll, the results were staggering. Despite playing on the league's absolute worst offense last year, dealing with a constantly collapsing pocket, executives, coaches, and scouts still voted Bowers the undisputed #1 tight end in the NFL.
And his yards after catch ability is phenomenal. I don't disagree with his talent at all.
Right, but it's how he uses that talent that neutralizes the exact defensive pressures you just brought up. One coordinator in that piece laid out exactly why. It is his route running, his separation, and most importantly, his zone instincts.
Instincts are great, but
When you talk about zone instincts, you're talking about a player who instinctively knows exactly when to stop running his route and just sit in the soft, vacated void between a linebacker and a safety. If a defense overloads the A gaps and brings the house to confuse Linderbaum, they are inherently vacating space in the middle of the field.
sure, they are leaving space.
And Bowers processes out space faster than anyone in the league. My point is that he is a generational matchup-proof weapon. He doesn't need perfect synchronization or a perfectly clean pocket to thrive. He operates as the ultimate fail-safe. Even if the gears grind a little bit early in the season, Bowers is the grease that keeps the chains moving.
He is a spectacular talent, but his production does not exist in a vacuum. And this is where the mechanical interdependency of the Kubiak offense actually becomes a massive liability.
A liability? How is elite blocking and running a liability?
Because of how it's linked, a recent Yardbarker analysis highlighted a highly critical limitation to this entire offensive philosophy. Brock Bowers' production is completely tethered to Ashton Janty and the success of the run game. Going back to your gears metaphor, Clint Kubiak's system requires the run game to be the primary drive gear. The entire passing attack is built off play action that mimics the wide zone run.
Right, because the initial visual for the defense is identical.
Exactly. At the snap, the line moves laterally, Janty presses the outside shoulder of the tackle, and the linebackers are forced to take 2 hard steps forward to honor the run. That false step is what opens up the 10 to 15-yard dig routes for Bowers over the middle.
Which creates massive voids.
Right, but what happens if the drive gear stops turning? What happens if an opposing defense decides they aren't going to respect a rookie quarterback, they walk a safety down into the box, and they stuff Ashton Janty at the line of scrimmage on 1st and 2nd down?
Well, they'd have to actually stuff him first, which is hard.
But if they do, the play-action mismatches that Bowers thrives on completely disappear. The linebackers no longer bite on the run fake, they just sink back into their zones. If the run game stalls, Bowers won't see those clean looks. The offense will fundamentally struggle to sustain drives because the system is entirely interdependent. If one gear locks up, the whole watch stops ticking.
Okay, now if you're a Raiders fan listening to this, you're probably thinking we've been burned by this exact kind of offensive fragility before, so I completely understand the hesitation. But I have to push back on this framing. Isn't interconnectedness the defining strength of every modern elite offense in the NFL?
It can be, sure.
You are framing the relationship between the run game and the pass game as a liability, but if you have a potential top 5 running back in Ashton Janty and the best run-blocking center in football anchoring the line, shouldn't we view that interdependency as a massive force multiplier rather than a vulnerability?
Only if it's working.
You are assuming defenses can simply choose to stuff the run, but the mechanics of the wide zone executed by premier talent makes that almost impossible to do consistently without leaving your cornerbacks on an absolute island.
Look, it is a force multiplier when you are playing downhill, when you have a lead, and when you are dictating the tempo of the game. Yes, in those conditions, it is a beautiful system, but it becomes a glaring vulnerability the moment you face real adversity, which, let's be honest, you inevitably do in the AFC West.
Every team faces adversity.
Right, but let's look at the game script. Let's say you're playing the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes does what he does, and suddenly you are down 10 points in the 3rd quarter. The defense looks at the scoreboard, and they know you have to pass to get back into the game. The threat of Ashton Janty running the wide zone practically diminishes to 0.
Okay, but
And suddenly, your play-action fake isn't holding the linebackers. Now, Tyler Linderbaum isn't moving laterally to block in space. He is stuck in straight drop-back pass protection against elite pinned-back edge rushers. The dominoes fall in the wrong direction. That interconnectedness means that a failure in game script cascades into a failure in all phases of the offense.
But that cascade effect you are describing, the panic of having to drop back and pass when the defense knows it's coming, that is exactly why the front office paid Kirk Cousins.
To be a drop-back passer?
yes,
If the primary wide zone system gets disrupted, you aren't relying on a deer-in-the-headlights rookie to navigate a collapsing pocket. You have a seasoned veteran who has seen every disguised coverage and exotic blitz package in the book. Cousins provides a remarkably high floor.
He does provide a floor, I'll give you that.
Right. He has made a career out of operating effectively from the pocket when the run game isn't perfect. And conversely, if they do transition to Fernando Mendoza later in the season, you introduce an incredibly high ceiling because of his ability to extend plays with his legs, something Cousins obviously can't do.
No, he cannot.
That duality in the quarterback room gives Las Vegas the exact variance needed to steal a wild card spot. Look, I will gladly concede that the Kansas City Chiefs are a dynasty. Taking the division crown away from them in year one of a rebuild is highly improbable. But the Raiders don't need to win the AFC West to make the playoffs. The blueprint they have constructed is specifically designed to maximize wins against the middle tier of the league.
We have to ground this discussion in statistical probability, though. You were talking about a team that won exactly 3 games last season. To secure a wild card spot in today's highly competitive AFC, you generally need to reach the 10-win mark. That requires a massive 7-win jump.
Which has happened before.
But look at the divisional math. In the AFC West, you have to play the Chiefs twice. You have to play a Denver Broncos team that possesses an elite defense twice. You have to play a defensively formidable Chargers team twice. In all likelihood, you were penciling in losses, 3 or 4 divisional losses, right out of the gate, just based on the sheer talent disparity and coaching continuity of your opponents.
Well, I wouldn't pencil in losses just yet.
The math becomes incredibly unforgiving. A jump from 3 wins to a wildcard spot in that specific gauntlet requires almost flawless execution against the rest of your schedule. The reporting from analysts across the league is stark about this. Nobody should be putting their money on a playoff berth just yet. Finishing 3rd or 4th in this division remains the most highly probable outcome.
That is a completely fair breakdown of the schedule, though I would frame the probability of that 7-win jump very differently. NFL history is replete with worst-to-first or worst-to-playoff turnarounds, and they almost always happen under one specific condition: when a team solves its quarterback and its offensive line issues in the exact same offseason.
Which is incredibly rare to actually solve instantly.
But the turnaround isn't incremental, it's exponential. By locking down the pivot of the offensive line with a generational processor in Linderbaum and creating a quarterback room that marries high-floor veteran stability with elite rookie upside, Las Vegas has fundamentally altered their statistical trajectory.
Altered? Sure. Solved? I don't know.
They aren't the same 3-win team from last year trying to play 5% better. The structural DNA of the offense is entirely new. They can dictate time of possession, they can protect the football, and they can scheme open the best tight end in the sport. That is a formula that travels well and keeps you in tight games in the fourth quarter.
The structural DNA of the offense is undoubtedly new. I agree with that. But the opponents lining up across from them are the same, and those opponents are elite. I agree that the methodology of their rebuild is logically sound. If you were writing a front office textbook on how to properly insulate and support a rookie quarterback, this offseason would be Chapter 1.
Right, it's a blueprint.
But practical execution against top-tier NFL defenses requires a level of immediate real-time perfection that we almost never see in year 1 of a new regime. Think about the mechanical chain of events that has to happen perfectly on a single play. Kubiak has to call the right play. Linderbaum has to correctly read the disguised defense. Cousins or Mendoza has to make the correct pre-snap adjustment.
And the line moves.
Right. The offensive line has to move in unison. Jaunty has to sell the wide zone run with his pads, and Bowers has to find the exact soft spot in the zone. It takes time. It takes live, full-speed reps against guys who are actively trying to destroy the play. Expecting all of those mechanical gears to click smoothly enough to win 10 games in the AFC West is, in my view, wildly optimistic.
So to summarize where we stand as we look at this roster, I maintain that while the gravitational pull of the AFC West is incredibly strong, the Las Vegas Raiders have constructed a genuinely textbook, empirical blueprint for quarterback development and offensive maximization. The transition from a dysfunctional 3-win team to a structurally sound roster is a tangible reality today.
A theoretical reality.
Well, by pairing a generational, matchup-proof talent in Brock Bowers with a premier offensive line anchor in Tyler Linderbaum, and filtering it all through Clint Kubiak's highly efficient wide zone system, the critical pieces are securely in place. This foundational overhaul removes the cognitive burden from the quarterback and makes their offensive ceiling uniquely dangerous for 2026. Because of this, I believe a surprise playoff appearance is a highly credible, mechanically supported outcome.
And my closing thought remains grounded in the gritty reality of on-field execution. While the individual acquisitions are undoubtedly impressive, from Bauer's peerless reputation as a zone beater to Linderbaum's historic contract, football is ultimately not played on a whiteboard.
That is true.
The practical, live-fire execution of blending all these new elements against elite, established divisional opponents is fraught with friction. The mechanical dependencies of Kubiak's system dictate that if the run game falters, or if the offensive line struggles to communicate against complex blitzes, the entire offensive engine can stall. History shows us that rebuilding teams rarely achieve the immediate frictionless perfection required to jump from 3 wins to a wild card spot in the NFL's toughest division.
Well, it is absolutely going to be one of the most fascinating case studies of the entire NFL season. We are going to see firsthand what happens when an organization tries to bypass the long, painful demolition phase of a rebuild and attempts to install a highly complex, interconnected offensive engine in a single offseason. Will the gears mesh perfectly under the pressure of the AFC West, or will the friction of so many new moving parts cause the system to grind to a halt?
Exactly. And I highly encourage everyone listening to look beyond the surface-level off-season grades and hype. Dig into the mechanical dependencies of a football team. Review the analyses of how Kubiak's wide zone system actually operates. Look closely at the defensive gauntlet waiting for them in their division. And, decide for yourself if this systematic overhaul has the structural integrity to break through.
We will leave it to you to decide if the Las Vegas Raiders are truly ready to execute this master plan, or if the gears still need a few seasons to fully synchronize. Thank you for joining us for the discussion. We will see you next time on The Debate.